I'll always remember the song they were playing the first time we danced, and I knew as we swayed to the music and held to each other, I fell in love with you. Could I have this dance for the rest of my life? Would you be my partner every night? When we're together, it feels so right. Could I have this dance for the rest of my life? I'll always remember that magic moment when I held you close to me. As we moved together, I knew forever you're all I'll ever need. Could I have this dance for the rest of my life? Would you be my partner every night? When we're together, it feels so right. Could I have this dance for the rest of my life? Could I have this dance for the rest of my life? Will you be my partner every night? When we're together, it feels so right. Could I have this dance for the rest of your life?
Thank you, Sigrid and Sheila. Sigrid and Stan danced through life together for 31 years. So what a touching and heartfelt way to start this service. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kate Lohr, and it is my good fortune to be the minister here at Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. We are gathered today to celebrate the life of Stanley Cummings, an incredibly gifted and kind friend of ours who died on July 13th from injuries sustained in a tragic bicycle accident. Wherever you're viewing this, either locally here in Port Townsend area or anywhere across the country, I hope that all of you know that you're welcome. May you feel the spirit of love, comfort, and peace that exists here. As is our tradition, I will begin this service with the lighting of our chalice. We will recite the same chalice lighting words that Stan had chosen for the Sunday service he was scheduled to deliver here 6 days after the accident. You know, Stan was an evolutionary biologist, so it comes as no surprise that he references words about Darwin's theory of evolution. These words are by Leon Magnuson. Please join me. It is not the strongest of the species that survive, not the most intelligent that survives. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. May the lighting of this chalice kindle in us a willingness to adapt. Here's to you, Stan. When someone we care for dies, Family and friends ordinarily gather in person to process their shared loss. That, of course, isn't safe to do during a pandemic. So, in the spirit of adaptation, we are gathered today virtually. For we need one another right now for support, for insight, and for a shared celebration of that remarkable man who touched all our lives, Stan Cummings. At times such as these, all the various faiths that sustain us separately come together in a harmony that acts across all creeds, reminding us that life is good and has meaning, and we are loved and connected in ways that transcend our comprehension. Death is never easy, but Stan was one of the luckier ones. He died doing what he loved, being active and out of doors. I saw him on the morning of his death, happily bringing his canoe to shore with the 3 crabs that he and Sigrid had just caught. It was only 2 hours later that he was struck while riding his bicycle, again with Sigrid. It took Stan 8 days to die, affording his loved ones some time to express their gratitude and share favorite memories with him. I imagine it also gave Stan some time to reflect upon his life and the many, many people he loved along the way. Yes, I imagine he suffered some in those 8 days because dying is not easy, but Stan died peacefully and with such beautiful intention. Here are some of the words from the statement of values he wrote after he and Sigrid took Carrie Andrews' Alps course on the end of life. His words: "The idea of remaining in a world where I cannot be a force for what is good and positive is not enough. An acceptable quality of life means that at least one of the following must be part of each day. I want my hands to touch the earth whenever possible, to plant a seed, prune a dead branch, and enhance the life of a plant or animal by that touch. I want to enhance the life of those around me by a smile, an expression of appreciation, a story told, a gift given, a witticism, words written or spoken. Nothing is more important than that my 2 daughters and their families feel my presence manifest in their lives, not as a decrepit old man, but as someone whose presence adds value and depth to their lives. It is important that my wife, Sigrid, feel my presence and that life is improved and enhanced by it. It is important that my community benefit from time to time from a small donation of money or time spent." Well said, dear friend, well said. Stan Cummings was clearly a lover of life and had such a strong and indomitable spirit. So when he died, it was a shock to us. How could Stan Cummings, the person who was larger than life, be gone? But of course, he's not really gone. He is still living and breathing through all of us and our shared memories of him. Stan and I never had a chance to speak about his memorial service. But if he had, I have a feeling he would want to have had this reading by Aaron Freeman read at his service. It will now be read by his friend and neighbor, Celeste Dybeck.
The reading is by Aaron Freeman titled, "You Want a Scientist to Speak at Your Memorial Service." You want a scientist to speak at your memorial. You want the scientist to talk of your grieving family about the conservation of energy so they will understand that your energy has not died. You want this scientist to remind them about the first law of thermodynamics, that no energy gets created in the universe and none is destroyed. You want them to know that all of your energy, every vibration, every BTU of heat, every wave of every particle of you is still in this world. And at one point, you'd hope that the scientist would step down from the pulpit and walk to your broken-hearted spouse and tell her that all the photons that ever bounced off your face, all the particles whose paths were interrupted by the smile, by the touch of your hair, hundreds of trillions of particles have raced off like children, their ways forever changed by you. And as your widow rocks in the arms of a loving family, may the scientists let her know that all the photons that bounced from you were gathered in the particle detectors that are her eyes, that those photons created within her constellations of electromagnetically charged neutrons whose energy will go on forever. According to the law of conservation of energy, not a bit of you is gone. You're just less orderly.
Thank you, Celeste. That was great. We will now hear a song by Stan's daughter, Tarla Mady.
When I started thinking about what song I wanted to sing today, the choice was fairly obvious. Well, I would love to sing his favorite song, Smokestack Lightning by Howling Wolf. I have to accept my own musical limitations. But as many of you know, my dad was a man of the sea. He loved all things that float and really enjoyed maritime history and culture. I spent much of my childhood on board the Pilgrim at what was then the Orange County Marine Institute, and I heard the crew, and Dad for that matter, sing sea shanties that to this day fill me with memories every time I hear them. Sadly, the Pilgrim sank earlier this year, which was heartbreaking for Dad. This was the song they played for her, and it's the song I want to play for Dad now. Oh, the time was hard, the wages low. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. And the grub was bad, and the gales did blow. And it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done and the winds do blow, and it's time for us to leave her. I thought I heard the old man say, leave her, Johnny, leave her. You can go ashore and take your pay, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done and the winds do blow, and it's time for us to leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her with a grin. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. For there's many a worser we've sailed in, and it's time for us to leave her. Leave her, Johnny, leave her. Oh, leave her, Johnny, leave her. For the voyage is done
Thank you, Tarla, for sharing that sailor song and your lovely voice with us. I'm sure your dad would be very touched to know that you sang a shanty at his memorial. Today, we are gathered across the miles to remember and celebrate Stan. His life was lived fully, passionately, with good humor and so much love. We gather to express our gratitude to him, mourn our loss, and remember the preciousness of life itself. To help us do that, we will now hear some reflections by the Reverend Bruce Bodie, Glenn Waldenberg, Jim Golden, Don Dybeck, as well as Stan's brother Bruce and his sister Cappy. Bruce?
I'm Bruce Bodie, former minister of the Quimper Unitarian Universalist Fellowship from 2004 to 2018, retiring in mid-June of that year. Another Stanley, not Stanley Cummings, but the American poet Stanley Kunitz, begins his late life poem titled The Layers with these words. He says, "I have walked through many lives, some of them my own, and I am not who I was, though some principle of being abides, from which I struggle not to stray." In our modern world, individuals commonly work through many lives in a variety of places, concluding their lives in a different community than they began their lives. And so memorial services like this one provide an opportunity to bring together fragments from those various lives lived in various places, and so that the individual that is remembered, we have some sense of the whole arc of that person's life, and we try to discern some principle of being that abides. In this regard, Sigrid has asked Glenn Waldenberg and me to speak about one project that Stan was involved with here in Port Townsend, and in particular, this religious fellowship. And I think that you will find that it speaks to some abiding principle of Stan's being. I'm speaking first, and I think that will become clear why that is the case when I hand it off to Glenn a bit later. Now, when this sanctuary in which this service is being held was built in 2009, 2010, along with it, there were other possible projects under the acronym UFOs, Unfunded Objects of Our Desire, one of which was the possibility of constructing a memorial circle and columbarium on our campus grounds. But the funding was not there for such a project at that time, and so it remained a back burner possibility until a board-appointed task force was formed in 2014. Sigrid Cummings, who had quite recently joined the fellowship, was oh so gently compelled to be on that task force because it was known that formerly she was an office administrator for St. Paul's Episcopal Church here in Port Townsend, which had a columbarium, and so of course that made her eminently qualified to be on that task force. Fast forwarding now to the late spring of 2018, and sparing you the ins and outs, ups and downs, starts, stops, and restarts of that task force, which had morphed into a committee, I'm a month away from retirement. And I realize this project is not going to happen on my watch, and probably not at all. The funding simply isn't there. But wait. At a QUUF auction item, a Southern-style dinner event on the evening of May 12, 2018, at the home of Lori Riley and Larry Morrell, at which Stan and Sigrid, as well as John Collins and Carol Graves, were present, somehow the subject of this stalled Memorial Circle and Columbarium project came up. Well, it seems that Stan had known other such projects that were stalled by a lack of funding, except on a much larger scale, such as the stalled capital campaign for our Northwest Maritime Center, for which, as he puts it, he was the hired gun to complete that project, which he did. Following the dinner, Sigrid approaches her beloved Stan, who personally at that time had no interest at all in having his ashes or his name put on some niche in some columbarium. Sweetie, she says, or at least this is how I imagine she approaches Stan. Sweetie, she says, about that slam dunk. So sometime later, I hear that Stan and Sigrid, John and Carol Collins, and others like Glenn and Phyllis Waldenberg and Sherry Irwin are going to try to see if they can get the project revived. But I'm skeptical, I'm retiring, and I'm leaving town for 9 months. Call me, I say. Call me if there's some information I have that might be helpful. And so I leave town, and I hear nothing over the 9-month period while I'm away from Port Townsend, and so I assume the project is kaput, which is where, Glenn, I think you should pick up the story.
Thank you, Bruce. As Bruce said, after many starts, stops, and restarts, this project seemed to be at a standstill and due to lack of funding. I had been asked to join the committee in the fall of 2017 to manage the design and construction of the project if and when it could move forward. But because we did not have means to fund the project, we're at a standstill, and the committee was really discouraged. But then, enter Stan. In the midsummer of 2018, with his well-thought-out plan for fundraising, Stan explained he had successes in the past fundraising for other nonprofit organizations and felt this was, as he put it, a slam dunk. He believed his plan was one that the committee and the members of the fellowship would support. He was persuasive, and the outcome of that meeting resulted in a reinvigorated enthusiasm to raise needed funds to be able to move forward on the actual construction. Over the next 10 months, we met monthly and more often when necessary, as we implemented Stan's plan. We set a goal to raise part of the funds by asking members to commit to purchase of the future niche and plaques in the Memorial Circle columbarium. We held educational and sales events at every Sunday service for months. Stan and Sigrid and other committee members were committed to this effort and did not miss a Sunday to pass on to the members the value of this project. We were able to secure loans and donations from members of the congregation in the finance and endowment committees. Now, Stan's style in leading this process was always inclusive, collaborative, with a positive attitude. His enthusiasm was contagious. There were times that 10 months of us had moments of skepticism for a variety of reasons. Stan continued to be persistent in working toward that funding goal. As we got further along in the funding plan, we had some significant increase in construction costs due to import tariffs on the granite assemblies. Stan's ability to be flexible and adaptive about expected changes kept us on the track for funding. We met our funding goals by that following May of 2019 and started construction by June 7th of that year. That project was completed November 1, 2019, and it was dedicated on the 10th of November that same year. It is my firm belief that Stan made this project happen. by steering the ship in the right direction. As Bruce said, I think you'll find that it speaks to the abiding principle of Stan's being. I am grateful for his commitment to this community and for sharing his talents and knowledge and compassion to make a difference. Stan will be greatly missed.
We will now hear from Jim Golden, and he will be followed by Don Dybeck.
I'm Jim Golden, and I've been a member of this fellowship since my wife Kendra and I arrived in 2001 after living for a year and a half in our motorhome, traveling the United States, looking for a new place to live and something new to do. Going forward to the 2012 QUUF auction, Kendra and I offered a 3-night stay in our motorhome at a nearby state park. And this stay would include the first night, a shared dinner, and a time for us to tell war stories about our life on the road. Well, Sigrid and Stan were the high bidders, and so in July of the next year, July 2013, we all headed out for Sequim Bay State Park for that evening, and then for Stan and Sigrid's first 2 nights or 3 nights living in a motorhome. Apparently, they enjoyed the experience because a month later, they owned their own motorhome, one with big front windows for Stan and a walk-around bed for Sigrid, and they had launched a new part of their active life together as RVers. Now, thanks to Facebook, we were able to enjoy their travels, places they visited, things they did on their many trips covering most of the United States. And we also got to share some of the unplanned parts of RVing, including the time when Stan was lying underneath the motorhome with Sigrid's hairdryer in hand, trying to thaw out a water line that had frozen in an unexpected snowstorm the night before. But it took almost 8 years before we actually shared an experience with Stan and Sigrid in person at a gathering of about nearly 20 QUUF RVers out at Salt Creek Recreation Area in this last spring, where we hiked together, we socialized together, and we all celebrated Stan's 76th birthday. Now, just last week, in fact, earlier this week, Kendra and I were camping at Twana State Park with Penny Ritterbusch and Kathleen Croston. Originally, Stan and Sigrid were going to be part of this group. So while we were there, I was telling Penny about how we could take credit for launching Stan and Sigrid on their motorhome, the motorhome part of their life. And Penny said, that's interesting. Did you know that Stan and Sigrid offered their motorhome in a QUUF auction, and we purchased it? And based on our weekend, we bought our own RV and have taken the RVing as part of our life. And to me, there's something here, a connectedness here, that is a part of what Stan and Sigrid have brought to people around them, for which we are very, very grateful. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Don Dybeck, and I'm honored that Sigrid asked me to talk about my friend Stan. His many attributes are quite well known to most of you, but I would like to list a few things that stand out for me. The primary characteristic that he so powerfully demonstrated was his intelligence. Stan was very smart. A borrowed admonition that I often use says, know something about everything, but know everything about something. Not Stan. He seemed to know everything about everything. His background as a teacher and educator was manifest in his expertise and his curiosity regarding a huge variety of subjects, including history, evolution, politics, religion, philosophy, and, to the benefit of his friends, Chinese cooking. Stan and Sigrid always arrived early at the UU Fellowship Sunday service, and we arrived a bit later. They always sat 3 rows back from the front on the south side of the main aisle. We always sat with them so we could chat or maybe whisper. One Sunday, Stan and Sigrid were not there. I whispered to my wife, Celeste, "I don't know where to park. The Cummings aren't here." Celeste and I have enjoyed RV camping, countless meals, and some hikes with Stan and Sigrid, but considering the hours and days that Stan and I fished on my boat, I would say that fishing with Stan from Nia Bay to CQ to right here in Port Townsend is where I really got to know him. In addition to endless fish stories, many of which were mostly true, we spent countless hours strategizing over minute details of technique, equipment, tides, currents, and of course, the excuses that we would use if we had a lack of success. My main criteria for a successful fishing trip is nothing broke and nobody got hurt. Stan was a very good fisherman and possessed critically important attribute. He never got seasick. Speaking of fishing, Stan and I were planning a trip to Sitka, Alaska late in August, and if I decide to go anyhow, his absence will be extremely painful. I really miss Stan. Thank you.
Thank you, Don. We are now going to hear from Stan's brother and sister, Bruce and Cappy. Each of them have recorded a video to be shown in here. So take it away, Bruce.
Hi, my name is Bruce Cummings. I'm Stan's younger brother. My daughter Jana recently referred to Stan as my dad's super together older brother. That he was. When I was growing up, I attributed this to his older age. In fact, though, he was more super together when he was 20 than I am now at 70. I looked up to him all my life. He was so accomplished in everything he undertook. He was an Eagle Scout. He was a cowboy. Yes, a cowboy. PhD, fundraiser, director, father, son, brother, friend. My wife Meg and I can swing a bit to music, but Stan and Sigrid, they could really dance. Bruno, Carrie Ann, and maybe even grumpy old Len would give them a 10. Stan would bring his family east almost every year to spend quality time with the rest of the family. When Mom died in 2009, we all realized that an era had ended. I assumed that I would see much less of Stan. Thankfully, he challenged me to keep up and strengthen our relationship apart from the rest of the family. My personal spiritual life is centered around a daily meditation practice with intermittent long retreats. Knowing this, Stan, 9 years ago, took a 10-day intensive silent meditation course that I conducted. His keen interest in discovering what I was so involved in showed a respect that touched me very deeply. In the last decade, at his instigation, we took several wild adventure hiking, camping, canoeing trips in the Olympic Park. Stan was not a tourist. He planned our trips in early June when no one else would be on the trails. We traversed rolling streams of snow melt, landslides, and numerous huge trees that had fallen over the trail. These trips sure tested the outer limits of my comfort level, but I was with my super together older brother. I'm not a smoker, nor was Stan, but most of the half dozen quality cigars I've smoked in my life, I enjoyed with him. At night on our camping trips, relaxing our aching and tired muscles, we would light up our cigars, stare into the fire and up at the stars, and softly tell stories to each other and the universe. I will never forget the peace, serenity, and deep love I felt for my brother in these moments. How many of us continue in our lives to growing in love, compassion, humor, empathy, and wisdom? Stan did. He showed us how to live and he showed us how to die. I'm eternally grateful to him for this gift. Thank you.
Good morning. Sigrid has allotted me all of 3 minutes to talk about my 73 years as Stan's little sister. It's hard to know where to begin, but I'll start with our childhood growing up in the small town of Greenfield, Massachusetts. Although I was 3 years younger than Stan and a girl to boot, he often picked me as his companion. Many hot summer mornings, we would bike the 3 miles down to the dammed-up river that served as Greenfield's swimming pool, where we would throw a white rock into the water, then frantically dive in to try to find it first. In the spirit of competition, we learned to hold our breaths for a very, very long time. When Stan built a rope swing on a steep hill below our home, he picked me to test it. He had built a starting platform to leap from so that I could swing higher, but I think it surprised us both when I swung out over the ravine and touched the tops of the trees growing at the bottom. Miraculously, I returned unscathed. In another of his harebrained schemes, he invited me to step into no-release bindings on a pair of old wooden skis and hang on to a water ski rope tied on the back bumper of the family car. He then took off at about 30 miles an hour, towing me behind him through the streets of Greenfield in the middle of the night during a blinding snowstorm. These were bonding experiences. But our times together were not always spent trying to kill me. When we moved into a home built in the early 1900s, my father put us to work removing and polishing every one of the many brass fixtures. It took many hours, but we passed the time in quiet companionship, periodically pausing to eat our fill of Concord grapes. Those grapes were the source of Stan's first, but not only, experiments with making wine. As teenagers and even into adulthood, we would seek the other's counsel on our love lives. The advice we gave each other was almost always bad, but at least we could trust that our secrets would be kept confidential, and to born and bred closed-mouthed New England Yankees, that was worth something. Neither of us returned to live at our family home once we started college, and Stan soon moved to the West Coast. But the bonds created during our childhood years remained, and through annual family reunions grew to envelop our nuclear families. My husband, Mark, and I came to love Jennifer, Tarla, and Sigrid, and Stan became a brother to Mark, a West Coast father to my son Corey, and a devoted uncle to our other 2 children, Cabot and Kimberly. We all loved him. We will all miss him, but he is a part of who we are and always will be. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Bruce, Cappy, Glenn, Dawn, and Jim for enlarging our sense of Stan's life by sharing your memories. It was great to hear. Now, when times are their darkest, when the light of hope flickers as small as a tea light, when despair rules the day, we humans turn to each other for the hope we seek, for the reminder that we're not alone, and that there is reason for moving on despite our loss of Stan. That's why it's important to come together like this. Together, we are a far-reaching community, a community of care and compassion from all over the globe. Yet still, we are connected, interconnected, and grieving together. To help cheer you up, though, I want to introduce Stan's family in San Diego. His grandson, Tobin Johnson, will read the poem that he read to his bumpa while he was in the hospital. The name of the poem is The Giant. Take it away, Tobin.
Hi, my name's Jen. I'm Stan's daughter. This is my husband, Ryan. And our sons, Finley, who's 4, and Tobin, who's 7. They called my dad Bumpa. And Tobin wants to read a poem that he read to my dad when he was in the hospital.
I'm gonna read Me and My Giant. I have a friend who is a giant, and he lives where the tall weeds grow. He's high as a mountain and wide as a barn, and I only come up to his toe, you know. I only come up to his toe. When the daylight grows dim, I talk with him way down in the marshy sands, and his ear is too far away to hear, but still he understands. He stands, I know he understands. For we have a code called the Scratch Tap Code, and here is for what we do. I scratch his toe. Once means hello, and twice means how are you? 3 times means does it look like rain? 4 times means don't cry. 5 times means I'll scratch you a joke. 6 times means goodbye, goodbye. 6 times means goodbye. And he answers me by tapping his toe. Once means hello, friend. 2 taps means it's very nice to feel your scratch again. 3 taps means it's lonely here. With my head in the top of the sky. 4 taps means today an eagle smiled as she flew by. 5 taps means oops, I just bumped my head against the moon. 6 times means sigh. And 7 means bye. And 8 means come back soon, soon, soon. 8 means come back soon. And then I scratch 1,000 times, and he taps with the backdy bim, and he laughs so hard he shakes the sky. That means I'm tickling him.
Anything else you want to say?
I love you, Bumpa, and I miss you.
I love you, Bumpa.
We all do.
It would be difficult to overstate what a wonderful father and grandfather my dad was. He was dedicated, loving, compassionate, and determined to show his children and grandchildren all of the most fun and educational experiences this world has to offer. Whether it's adventures to be had, trails to be explored, seas to be sailed, or hugs to be collected. He's desperately missed. I love you, Dad.
Thank you, Tobin. You did a great job. Your bumpa would be proud. Now, when Sigrid and I were considering which song to use for our closing hymn, Sigrid knew instantly which one Stan would like the best. It's called Blue Boat Home. The choir at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Greensville, Massachusetts, sang this song at Stan's mother's memorial service. Now our choir will sing it for us.
Far away from the rolling ocean,
As this service draws to a close, we will now extinguish our chalice, but don't go away because a slideshow of Stan's life will follow this, set to music that he loved. Please join me in these words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, the fire of commitment, or the power of transformation. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Enjoy the slideshow.
Boom, 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 boom. I'm gonna shoot you right down, right off of your feet. Take you home with me and put you in my house. Boom, 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 boom. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love to see you walk up and down the floor. Or when you're talking to me, that baby talk. I just like it like that. Or when you talk like that, you knocks me out, right off of my feet. How. Oh, baby, I love you, baby. Baby, little baby. Ah, yeah. shake it, baby. Shake it, baby. Shake it, baby. One time for me. Oh, yeah. When she walked that walk and talked that talk and whisper in my ear and tell me that she loved me. I love that talk, that baby talk. When she talk like that, she knocks me dead right off of my feet. How. Oh, yeah. Well, come on home to me, baby, and shake it, baby, and shake it, baby, one time. About a shark, yes, man.